Do animated sitcoms suck now? Well, if you look around the internet, you'll find a variety of different opinions, all arguing either yes or no. What do I think? Well, I think it's all very interesting. So today, I want to explore the different ideas and arguments in order to have a better understanding of what people are saying. Then at the end of the video, I'll look back and give you my opinion. Now, of course, I do know that a lot of the shows I'm going to talk about today do have some fans, and if you are a fan of one of these shows that I'm going to be talking about, just know that I have nothing against you, and that, really, I believe that everybody is free to enjoy whatever the hell they want. Now, with that said, let's get into it. Getting started, I think it's only right to start with defining what an animated sitcom is. For this video, I'm just going to keep it simple and define an animated sitcom as a Simpsons-like series focusing on comedy and a select cast of characters, largely because I really believe that The Simpsons became so popular and eventually just became the first thing that anybody would think of when talking about animated sitcoms. And if you think that's a soft definition, well, Google literally defines a sitcom as a situation of comedy.
Wow.
Gee, thanks Google, I can really see why you're the world's most popular internet browser. I mean, Google's technically right, but it's still not the most helpful thing in context. So yeah, we're just going to go ahead and use my definition for this video. I believe that the core of any animated story is its animation. Animated stories do, of course, practice a balance between their writing, editing, acting, and everything else. However, when it comes to the medium of animation, it's the art development and the animation that sets it apart from the other mediums of storytelling. So yeah, the animation of any show or film is pretty important. But in saying this, yes, I will also say that I am not arguing that every animated show must always have brilliant animation. Animation and art differs from style to style and show to show. Now, when people attempt to argue whether or not animated sitcoms suck nowadays, they inevitably try and bring up the subject of their animation. And it's generally argued that there is some sort of cheapness, especially to adult animated sitcoms these days. And evidence of this point is generally found in the stilted, almost manufactured look of some shows. The Simpsons, Family Guy, American Dad, and their budget contemporaries such as Brickleberry, Paradise PD, and of course Mr. Bertram. The animation for a lot of animated sitcoms is something that a lot of animation fans and some animated sitcom fans can agree is pretty less than stellar, especially in comparison to a lot of other animated shows. Something that's also really added to this topic over the last few years is the way the animation industry has tried to really succeed with exploring the boundaries of just how much can be done with the animation and visuals of any story, film, or show. So many films and TV shows have all released over the last few years that have truly phenomenal art and animation direction. However, unfortunately, it doesn't feel as if we've seen the same sense of experimentation in the animated sitcom, and especially adult animated sitcom space. In comparison to so many other spaces of the animation industry, that part of the industry focused on these animated sitcoms seems to have seriously fallen behind. Many people online absolutely argued that this segment of the industry is definitely lacking. Of course, there are reasons for this, and yes, if you know anything about the animation industry, you'll know that there are two main answers for this. These are both related to their budgets and their development times. Lots of these shows derive a lot of their network interest from the longevity, their cheap production costs, and their short development periods. I have no doubt that many of the artists working on these shows are seriously devoted to their work and always trying to do the best they can. But still, the artists are always being pushed to work quickly, for less, and for longer. So many shows today have their own independent looks and styles, and so many of them have so many talented artists working on them. But still, unfortunately, many of these shows just don't have the budgets to properly develop their shows. Now, these shows could put more of their budgets into their animation and visuals. However, without cutting down on the number of episodes per season, it means that the shows would have to drastically change how they balance their budgets. Essentially meaning that to give more money to the animation budget, they would have to take money away from the writing, perhaps. Which leads us to... Now, when talking about the writing of these shows, the main thing I want to talk about has to be the comedy. Not whether or not I think the comedy is good or funny even, but instead I want to talk about how the problem with the writing stems from it prioritising the comedy over basically everything else. Characters, story, everything else in these shows are basically being abandoned to focus on the comedy. Some people really don't see what the problem is, but I kind of do, and I know that some people will disagree with me on this point, but I just don't quite understand how some people can't not see the problem. Seriously, when you sit down to watch a show, I feel like you're making a conscious decision to engage with characters and stories. If you're just wanting a simple laugh, why don't you go watch a comedian, or read a joke book? I'm not saying that these shows shouldn't try to be good comedies, but what I am saying is that these shows should at least try a little to be a bit more consistent with the stories they're telling. For example, look at South Park. South Park is an intensely funny and absurd series. However, the show's writing is still mostly consistent to the characters and the world regardless of how absurd it is. There's so much to the writing, in fact, that YouTubers like Blooms and Johnny Two Cellos have entire videos dedicated to explaining the history and development of various aspects of the series. The same can't be said for shows like Family Guy, where the comedy is so heavily prioritised that the showrunners will just sacrifice various aspects of characterisation and world building for the sake of a joke. Now, to prove this point, I want to take a look at two rather interesting episodes from both shows. For South Park, we'll be taking a look at Season 8, Episode 14's Woodland Critters Christmas. Now, I've chosen this episode less for the story of the episode and more for the story of the episode's development. Of course, South Park is famous for its notorious 6-day development periods per episode, and what's so interesting about the story of this episode is how Matt and Trey spent days figuring out how to just put the story together. Matt and Trey already knew what they wanted to have happen in the episode, but were having trouble getting the story to flow properly, before eventually coming up with the idea of the whole story being something told by Cartman. Because of that, the story and characterization details were able to flow and find a new context. Now, Family Guy Season 10, Episode 2, Seahorse Seashell Party, is of course an infamous episode of the show, with that being the episode where Meg really attempts to stand up for herself and recontextualize her relationships with the rest of her family. However, the show's attempts to do this fall flat, on account of the fact that the ending of the episode attempts to frame Meg's relationship with the rest of her family as being any other strange family relationship, despite all the blatant abuse.
Hi, Dad!
This episode even ends with the family attempting to come to a new understanding of one another, and the characters promising to be kinder to Meg. This episode attempts to recontextualize Meg's character and her place in the story. However, the show fails to commit to this change. Instead, the show continues to prioritize its comedy over its story, and Meg's place as being the butt of the joke of course meant that Meg's situation and her relationship with her family didn't end up changing all that much. My point is simply that comedy shows are still shows, and that they shouldn't sacrifice one aspect of their show, like its characters or its story, for the sake of another aspect, like its comedy. And I say this because I don't believe that it's the comedy that brings viewers back every episode. Any character in any show can tell any joke, but only specific characters in specific settings can both tell specific stories and make specific jokes. Now, whether or not the comedy of these shows is even good or not, I can't really say, because comedy is of course subjective, and everybody is going to have their own opinions on it. Which, if that sounds like a good and easy way out of this question, that's because it is. Now, moving on. Okay, so this is a topic I haven't seen argued that much, but is still something that I've seen argued about enough. With the general argument I see often being made, something akin to, these actors are just acting in a sitcom, so they must not be trying very hard. Now, this is something I have difficulty applying to every sitcom out there, but is still something that I kinda understand. I mean, thanks largely to the deluge of cheaply made animated sitcoms that we've seen released recently, it's really not that hard to understand where this argument might be coming from. Now, also add in the almost 40-year lifespan of some of these shows, and I think you can understand what the problem here might be. And yes, this problem does get even worse when you choose to factor in the existence of soulless political nonsense shows like Mr. Bircham, where you can just really see and hear how much the voice actors don't actually care about making a good show, as much as they do about fighting some culture war bullshit. And yes, before anybody comments, I do know that not all voice actors care as little as this. In fact, I actually believe that many of them are very dedicated to their work and roles. The problem again is that there just isn't enough money in the budget or time in the development of every episode to allow for greater quality control. I have nothing against a lot of voice actors out there in the business right now. I'm sure a lot of them are just trying to make their way out in the world. In fact, I'm sure many voice actors are coming into the industry ready to give their role to their characters. Like a lot of the artists and animators working on these shows, I'm sure a lot of these voice actors are coming in ready to make every effort to give to their characters. Instead, I think the problem will probably lie with who is directing these performances. Voice actors can only give their performances as they're requested and as they're guided. So the problem, of course, here is going to lie with the directors and the creators. But of course, in saying that, the problem won't lie squarely with them either. Again, it'll be a combination of different factors. Like with the faults in the animation, these combination of factors will probably lie in the areas of budget and development time. When I think about voice acting in animated sitcoms, I think about one scene and one character specifically. And I'm sure several people are going to find it pretty strange, but here it is. When I hear about voice acting in animated sitcoms, I think about The Simpsons' Marge character. And the scene I think about the most in relation to her character has to be the scene where she admits to taping over hers and Homer's wedding video in the Simpsons movie. And I'm sure that for many Simpsons fans, that they will agree with me when I say that in this scene, Marge's voice actor gives her best performance. Not only because you can hear how much the voice actor is dedicated to the character and to the scene, but also because the voice actor has been given enough time to go over the scene. Apparently during development, the director would have Marge's voice actor go over the scene various times, until eventually her voice got so tired that she was able to give this performance. And it's such a great performance that it's stuck with me and a lot of other animation fans and Simpsons fans ever since. And so because of this and various other aspects of voice acting in animation and animated sitcoms, I can't just blanketly say that voice acting in these animated sitcoms has gotten just bad now, or that it sucks now. I just can't say that. Not entirely. Like with the animation and the writing of these shows, I do agree that we've seen a little bit of a quality fall off in this area, but I do still think that there are people out there working hard and giving their all to their roles and just doing the best they can on these shows. So, do animated sitcoms suck now? Well, they're certainly not doing great, to say the least. However, can I really get myself to say that they suck now? Well, I've analysed the arguments that I've found argued the most, and I'm gonna say kinda? Maybe? It's hard to say for a couple reasons. Firstly, I'm just not generally a fan of saying something sucks completely. At the end of the day, I believe that despite however I perceive the quality of something, I know that someone is going to see it differently. Of course, art is subjective, and everybody's going to have a different opinion. Especially when it comes to stuff like this, like story, comedy, animation, and voice acting. Several of the shows I've talked about already still have fans, and many of them still claim that the shows are still genuinely enjoyable, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, people are allowed to like whatever they want. Now, when it comes to the issue of whether or not I think there's a general problem with quality control, lack of originality, and development crunch in the industry, the answer has to be, well, yeah. But in saying that, I've got to say that this isn't specific to the animated sitcom space of the industry. Instead, it's really more of a wider industry problem. And honestly, I really don't think that the answer here is to just say that, or just decide that something like the animated sitcom sucks now. really, I think that the answer is to hope for and go out and support good new shows and be there in the future for those creators who do give us these new shows. Because the only way I believe we're going to see these types of new development in the future is to just go out and show that we want new shows, better shows, and just greater stories. Of course, there are some elements of animated sitcoms that I think suck and I just don't like. But there are elements of all types of stories and shows that I think suck and I just don't enjoy. But still, I take the good with the bad, and I try to look at it equally. Again, I've made this video not because I wanted to say that these shows suck or not. Instead, I've made this video to just properly understand, or try and understand, what people are saying about these shows, what they could be doing better, and how they've gotten into this situation. Again, I made this video because I wanted to tackle this subject from a different angle. And hey, if you'd like to keep this conversation going, let me know down in the comments what you think of these shows, what you think their problems are, whether or not you think they even have problems or not, whether or not you think I'm just completely wrong about everything. Just, I don't know, just let me know in the comments and maybe we'll get a conversation going. But still, I think that I've made this video because I want to see something better come out in the future. I want to see things get better for the industry, for the people who work in it, and for the people who enjoy what comes out of it. So in conclusion, some aspects of some shows might suck and they might not be what everybody's looking for in a show. But still, I'm sure that by talking about these things and getting a conversation going, we can see these things develop and get better and better in the future. And also, in saying this, and having this video, I'm just going to repeat again that everybody's allowed to enjoy whatever the hell they want, whether or not they like these shows or not. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think about these topics in the comments below, and until next time, like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff. Bye!